High above the cold dark of the outer solar system, a single crimson eye turns slowly in the clouds of the largest planet, and it has been turning there longer than anyone can truly say. It is not a thing of stone or sea, but a storm, a vast, patient wound of colour painted onto a sky that has no ground beneath it. Imagine a swirl of deep rose and burnt amber, wider than the whole of the earth, drifting forever across bands of pale ivory and dusky brown, never weakening, never landing, never coming to rest. Around it, the air races in opposite directions at speeds that would tear any earthly mountain apart, and yet from a great distance the whole thing seems almost still, almost serene, the way a hurricane looks calm from orbit. This is the Great Red Spot, the most famous storm in the known universe, and tonight it is yours to wander through in your mind, with nothing asked of you but to soften and to listen. Somewhere out beyond the warm light of the sun, this red whirlpool keeps its endless rotation, a single point of colour so enormous that early observers, peering through brass telescopes by candlelight, could see it as a faint reddish smudge and wonder what it could possibly be. A storm older than the telescope itself, a storm that may have been raging when your grandparents' grandparents were children, and long, long before. You do not need to remember any of this. You do not need to hold a single number or name. Let your mind grow loose and unhurried, the way clouds loosen at the edge of sleep. Let the facts drift past you like soft weather, and whatever stays with you can stay, and whatever slips away was never yours to keep. There is nothing to study here, nothing to grasp. There is only a great red calm turning in the dark, and your own breath slowing to meet it, and the simple pleasure of letting a beautiful thing pass through you while your body sinks deeper into the warmth around you. So let the weight of the blankets press you kindly downward, and let the room around you fade until only the storm remains, glowing against the black. The first thing to know, as you drift closer, is how astonishingly long this storm has lasted, and how that single fact alone rewrites everything you thought you understood about weather. For the storm you're looking at has very likely been spinning continuously for centuries. When astronomers in the 17th century first turned their lenses toward Jupiter and noted a persistent oval marking in its southern clouds, they were not watching something new. They may have been watching something already ancient. One observer in the 1660s recorded a spot in just that band of the planet. Whether it was this very storm or an earlier one, no one can say for certain, for the careful, unbroken record only firms up much later. By the most cautious reckoning, the Great Red Spot has been followed for at least 190 years of continuous observation, and by the more generous reckoning, which links it to those earlier sightings, it has churned for well over 350. To call it a storm at all feels almost too small a word, for storms on your own world are born and die within days. This one has outlived empires. Consider, as you breathe out, just how strange that endurance is. On Earth, the most ferocious hurricane spends its whole life in perhaps a week or two, before the friction of land and the cooling of the sea pull it apart. It is a brief and violent thing here and gone. The Great Red Spot has no land to strike and no ocean to chill it. It rides upon an atmosphere thousands of miles deep with nothing solid beneath, and so it simply turns and turns and turns, gathering fresh energy from the planet itself, a single weather system that has perhaps watched human history unfold from the very moment people first learned to look up and write down what they saw. And it is large beyond easy imagining. Today the storm stretches wide enough to swallow your whole world. It measures about 1 1/3 Earths across, and it is slowly shrinking, narrowing year by year from the far greater span the old astronomers once recorded. Picture that for a moment as you let your shoulders drop. A single swirl of cloud broad enough to hold your homeworld whole, and the swirl itself merely one feature on the face of a planet that could swallow more than 1,000 Earths entire. Against such a scale, every worry you carried into this room grows very, very small, and there is a deep comfort in that smallness, in knowing the cosmos turns at sizes that make your troubles weightless. Here, though, is a gentle surprise. the kind that asks nothing of you but a soft smile in the dark. The great red spot is slowly shrinking. Over the past century and more, careful watchers have measured it growing narrower, its great oval drawing inward, becoming rounder and more compact than it once was. In the time of those 19th century astronomers, it sprawled perhaps 40,000 kilometers across. Today, it spans something closer to 16,000, about 1 1/3 times the width of the Earth. It is still wide enough to hold your entire planet, but the giant is contracting, and no one yet knows exactly why or where this slow tightening will lead. There is something almost tender in that. Even the most enduring storm in the heavens is quietly changing, breath by breath, just as you are. For all its age and size, the spot is a creature of pure motion, and within it the winds run at a pace that defies the calm it shows from afar. Around the rim of the storm, the clouds whip along at hundreds of miles an hour, somewhere between 270 and 420, depending where you measure, faster than any wind ever recorded on the surface of the Earth, faster than the swiftest jet. And yet at the very centre, in the storm's deep heart, the air is strangely calm, almost still, a quiet eye held within a racing wall. You're drifting toward that quiet centre now, past the roaring rim, into the hushed core where even a storm wider than a world remembers how to be peaceful. Notice too the way the storm turns, for it spins in the opposite sense to the hurricanes of your home. The great red spot rotates counterclockwise in Jupiter's southern hemisphere, completing a full turn in roughly 6 Earth days, a single unhurried revolution of a whirlpool wider than a world. On Earth, storms in the southern half of the world spin the other way. This giant breaks even that familiar rule, wheeling against the grain of every hurricane you've ever known. It is what scientists call an anticyclone, a high-pressure storm, a dome of cloud that bulges upward rather than sinking inward. On Earth, the storms that spin this way are usually mild, the fair weather highs that bring clear skies. Yet here the same kind of system has grown into the fiercest weather in the solar system. This is part of why it lasts. Unlike the low-pressure tempests of Earth that feed on warm water and quickly burn themselves out, this towering high-pressure swirl is stable and self-sustaining, a structure that holds itself together across the long centuries the way a spinning top keeps its balance, and it stands tall above the clouds around it, lifted higher than its neighbours by some 5 miles. The summit of the Great Red Spot rises above the surrounding cloud deck like a sprawling plateau of haze, its peak so elevated and so cold that it punches up into a thinner, colder layer of the Jovian sky. Imagine a single storm so immense that it builds its own mountain of cloud, a raised mesa of swirling vapour towering over an already endless atmosphere. From the side, were you somehow floating beside it, you would see it as a great red table lifted into the dark, casting its own enormous shadow across the bands below. The colour itself remains one of the loveliest mysteries in all of planetary science. No one is entirely certain what makes the Great Red Spot red. The surrounding clouds of Jupiter are pale, made of white ammonia ice and soft tan hues, and yet here, in this one enormous oval, the sky blushes deep rose and rust and brick. The leading idea is that sunlight falling on chemicals lifted from far below cooks them into reddish compounds, that ultraviolet light breaks apart ammonia and acetylene and other molecules high in the storm, and the broken pieces recombine into pigments that stain the cloud tops crimson. Some researchers suspect the active ingredients are sulfur or phosphorus, hauled up from the deep. Others lean toward those sun-baked organic hazes. No one has yet matched the exact recipe in a laboratory, and so the precise chemistry remains genuinely unsolved. The spot in this telling is a place where starlight paints, where the bare radiation of the distant sun is enough to colour a storm the size of a world. There is a softness in realising how little is still known about something so large and so old. It has been watched for centuries, photographed by robots sent across the void, its winds measured and its clouds weighed, and still its deepest secrets remain folded away inside it. Why exactly it is red, how far down it reaches, why it has lasted so long when by every earthly rule it should have faded ages ago. These open questions are not failures to be anxious about. They are gifts, quiet invitations, a reminder that the universe keeps more wonders than any mind could hold, and that you may rest now without needing to solve a single one of them. The storm does not need you to watch it. It will keep its long rotation through the night and through the year and through the century, whether eyes are upon it or not, asking nothing, needing nothing, simply being, far beyond the small bright circle of your room. Beneath the painted summit, the storm sinks far deeper than anyone once imagined, plunging downward into the planet like the root of an immense invisible tree. For a long time, astronomers wondered whether the Great Red Spot was only a shallow feature, a thin curl of weather skating across the cloud tops. Then a spacecraft listened to the way Jupiter's gravity tugged and pulled, and the answer arrived almost unbelievably. The storm reaches at least 200 miles down into the atmosphere, some 300 kilometers, and by certain measures perhaps closer to 500, far below the visible clouds, into pressures and warmths no human eye will ever see. That is deeper than the roots of the racing jet streams that cradle it, deeper than the weather-making layers themselves. The crimson oval you picture floating on the surface is merely the crown of something that descends like a colossal whirlpool into the body of the giant itself. That depth helps explain its endurance, the way the deep keel of a great ship steadies it against the waves. A storm anchored only in the thin upper haze might be torn away by the surrounding winds, but one that sinks hundreds of miles into the planet has roots, a deep core of swirling air drawing warmth and stability from below. It is held not by any single thread, but by the entire weight of the atmosphere closing around it, and so it persists, century after century, a structure too deeply set to easily come undone. The things that last are often the things rooted far beyond what can be seen. Around this rooted giant, two great rivers of wind run in opposite directions, and the storm rolls between them like a marble caught between two moving hands. To the north of the Great Red Spot, a powerful jet stream flows one way. To the south, an equally powerful jet flows the other. The storm sits nestled in the space between, spun by their opposing pull, rotating forever in the shear of these two endless currents. It is the contrast itself that gives the storm its life. The meeting of opposites, the friction of one wind against another, smoothed into the long, graceful turning of a single great wheel of cloud, and those winds carry the storm slowly around the planet, drifting it westward against the turning of the world below. The storm is fixed to no single place on Jupiter, for Jupiter has no solid ground to be fixed to. Instead, it wanders, creeping steadily around the globe over months and years, its longitude shifting little by little, a great red ship sailing a sea that has no shore. Astronomers must track it as it drifts, predicting where it will be, watching it slide past the planet's other markings like a drifting continent of storm gliding across an endless sky. Within that endless sky, the spot is far from alone, for Jupiter wears bands of white and tan that wrap the whole planet in horizontal stripes. These are the zones and belts, the famous banding of the giant, pale zones of rising, cooling cloud and darker belts of sinking, warming air, alternating from pole to pole like the stripes of some immense painted shell. The pale zones sit higher and colder, the dark belts lower and warmer, each one a separate climate wrapped clean around the whole planet. The Great Red Spot is cradled at the southern edge of one of these belts, a single vivid jewel set into a wide tapestry of ribbons that have themselves been flowing, unbroken, for as long as anyone has watched. The bands themselves are rivers of jet stream, each one racing past its neighbour in a different direction, and Jupiter holds more of them than any world you know. Where Earth has a handful of meandering jet streams that wander and wobble, Jupiter has many, perhaps a dozen or more, stacked neatly from equator to pole, each one a stable lane of wind hundreds of miles wide and hurtling along at hundreds of miles an hour. They almost never stray out of their lanes the way Earth's jets do. They hold their courses with an eerie precision, the whole planet wrapped in tidy parallel currents, and the great red spot rides among them like the grandest swirl in a deck of running streams. Why those bands stay so neat and so steady is itself a wonder being slowly unravelled. On Earth, the spin of the planet and the unevenness of land and sea throw the winds into chaos. On Jupiter, with no continents and no oceans to disturb them, and with the planet's own internal heat rising evenly from below, the jet streams settle into their orderly rows and stay there, year upon year, decade upon decade. The result is a sky of remarkable calm beneath its fury, a single organised machine of weather, repeating its patterns so faithfully that the planet's striped face is recognisable across the centuries, a familiar painting that barely changes from one human lifetime to the next. Hidden within those bands, the white ovals you might glimpse near the great red spot are storms in their own right, smaller cousins drifting in its wake. For decades, 3 bright white storms circled in the same southern latitudes, each a swirl of pale cloud, each large enough in its own right to be a marvel. They had themselves been born, back in the 1930s, when a single pale band broke apart into 3 separate ovals. Astronomers watched them for the better part of a human lifetime, 3 white pearls strung along the same band as the great crimson one. And then, slowly, something remarkable began to happen among them, the kind of celestial event that unfolds over years rather than seconds, far too patient to ever startle a drifting mind. For those 3 white storms, over the turn of the millennium, merged one into another and became a single new storm. 2 of them drew together first, then the third folded in, until 3 separate ovals had combined into one larger swirl of pale cloud. And in the years that followed, this newborn storm did something its white siblings never had. It began to turn red, its clouds slowly blushing from white to amber to a deep rust, until it earned a name of its own among those who watched the planet, Red Spot Jr. A second red storm, born within a single human lifetime, a small echo of the great one, reddening in the same southern sky as though the planet had decided to paint a second jewel beside the first. There is a strange and lovely intimacy in that, to know that on a world hundreds of millions of miles away, storms are born and merge and change their colours, that the sky of Jupiter is alive with slow events, that even now as you lie in the dark, the giant is quietly rearranging its weather. The 2 red storms, the great elder and its smaller child, have even drifted close to one another over the years, passing nearby like 2 ships exchanging a slow nod across an endless sea. The larger one's winds brushing the smaller as they slid by. Let that passing image rest in you, 2 red eyes meeting briefly in the clouds as your breathing grows softer and the night settles more fully around you. To reach this place, to truly know it, humanity sent its eyes across the dark, and the first true close visitors arrived nearly 50 years ago. 2 spacecraft named Pioneer were the earliest to cross the Great Gulf and pass by Jupiter, sweeping near the giant and sending home the first close portraits ever taken of the Great Red Spot, faint and grainy and utterly precious. Before them, the storm had only ever been a smudge seen from afar, a marking glimpsed through telescopes across hundreds of millions of miles. Now, for the first time, a machine made by human hands had flown close enough to look the great storm nearly in the eye and carry the image gently home across the void. Then came 2 travellers named Voyager, and through their cameras the great red spot became, for the first time, a living thing in motion. As these spacecraft approached at the end of the 1970s, they took photograph after photograph over days and weeks, hundreds of images of the same turning face, and when those frames were placed in sequence and played one after another, the storm awakened. People on Earth watched for the very first time the great red spot actually turning, its clouds curling and rolling around its great rim, smaller storms being swept into its edge and spun along its border like leaves caught at the lip of a turning drain. A centuries-old marking, suddenly alive, suddenly breathing, captured in the flicker of the first moving pictures ever made of another world's weather. What those moving images revealed was a place of astonishing turbulence at the boundary, where the calm of the eye gives way to a churning wall. Around the storm's rim, the Voyager cameras caught white clouds being drawn in and stretched and torn. Smaller storms swallowed and shredded along the edge, a constant, restless commotion encircling the quiet heart. It was as though the storm fed upon the weather around it, pulling in lesser disturbances and spinning them into its own great rotation, growing not weaker, but renewed by everything it touched. The films revealed a whole spiral of moving air, clouds racing around the rim in a few days while the broad heart of it lay nearly motionless. And yet, for all that violence at its border, the deeper one looked, the more the centre seemed to hold a profound and unmoving stillness. Long after the Voyagers had sailed on toward the edge of the solar system, another spacecraft came not to pass by but to stay, settling into orbit around Jupiter to watch for years. Its name was Galileo, and for nearly 8 years it circled the giant, returning again and again to study its storms, its moons, and its endless striped sky. Galileo even released a small probe that plunged directly into Jupiter's atmosphere, not into the Great Red Spot itself, but into the clouds nearby, parachuting downward for nearly an hour and reaching almost 100 miles into the air, sending back measurements of wind and temperature and pressure as it descended. The deeper it fell, the harder the winds blew and the hotter the air grew, until at last it was crushed and silenced by the deepening weight around it. A single brave machine, swallowed whole by the giant, gifting its final readings to the dark as it went down. In our own time, a spacecraft called Juno has flown closer to the Great Red Spot than anything before it, skimming directly over the storm's churning summit. Sweeping low across Jupiter's clouds in long, looping orbits, Juno passed almost directly above the Great Crimson Oval, its cameras and instruments staring straight down into the swirl from only a few thousand miles overhead. From that intimate vantage, the storm filled the view entirely, an ocean of curling red and pink and cream, every eddy and filament laid bare, the most detailed portrait of the most famous storm ever assembled by human hands. To make those passes, the spacecraft had to dive again and again through the fiercest belts of radiation around the planet, shielding its delicate electronics behind thick metal walls, risking itself each time for a few minutes of looking down. It was as close as anyone has yet come to standing at the very edge of the storm and looking in, and it was Juno, listening to the subtle pull of Jupiter's gravity, that finally revealed how deep the storm truly runs. By measuring tiny changes in the spacecraft's motion as it passed over the Great Red Spot, scientists could weigh the mass of the storm beneath the clouds and trace its route downward, discovering that it plunges hundreds of miles into the planet, far deeper than any storm on Earth, deep enough that its base sits in a region warmer and denser than the visible crimson summit above. The same measurements hinted that the storm may reach down further than the jet streams that surround it, a root system deeper than the very winds that feed it. A storm with a hidden underworld, its red face merely the smallest visible part of an enormous unseen column turning silently within the giant. Juno also looked at the Great Red Spot in colours no human eye can perceive, listening to the heat rising from within. Carrying instruments that sense infrared light, the spacecraft mapped the warmth of the storm and found a surprising thing, that the air high above the Great Red Spot is hundreds of degrees hotter than it has any right to be, hot enough that the temperature there climbs well past what the feeble distant sunlight could ever supply, heated instead from the roar of the storm itself far below. The churning and crashing of the great storm sends waves of energy upward, and those waves break in the thin upper air and warm it, so that the region above the spot glows with a heat that had long puzzled those who study the giant. The storm, it seems, warms its own sky, a small stubborn furnace lighting the cold ceiling above itself. A newer eye in space, the Great Infrared Observatory launched to a point far beyond the moon, has turned its mirrors toward the giant and seen the storm in fresh and tender detail. Sensitive to the warmth of things rather than their visible glow, this telescope revealed the high hazes drifting over the Great Red Spot to be far more intricate than anyone had supposed, threaded with delicate arcs and faint streaks of cloud that ripple above the crimson oval like ghosts upon its surface. Where older instruments saw a smooth red shape, this one found a shifting textured ceiling of haze, a hidden weather riding atop the storm in light no eye could ever catch. It even glimpsed faint glowing arcs and ripples in the high air above the spot, signs of waves rolling through the upper atmosphere, set in motion by the churning far below. The most studied storm in the heavens still had new faces to show, waiting in colours beyond sight. That same scrutiny has begun to map the winds of the storm in 3 dimensions, layer upon layer, from the cloud tops downward. By tracking how features move at different depths, scientists have found that the Great Oval does not turn at a single speed throughout its height. Rather, its winds shift gradually as one descends, slowing and turning through the layers like a great staircase of moving air. Near the visible top, the rim races fastest, and deeper down the motion eases, the whole storm a graded column of rotation rather than a simple spinning disk. To picture the storm fully is to picture not a flat whirlpool, but a tall and layered tower of turning, each level sliding gently past the one above. The very name the storm carries is younger than the storm itself, given long after it began to turn. For much of its early history, the great marking in Jupiter's clouds was simply noted as an oval or a spot, described by colour and shape in the careful language of astronomers. Only in the later 19th century, around the 1870s and 80s, when the feature flushed especially vivid and red, did the name Great Red Spot settle into common use, a plain and fitting title for a plain and astonishing thing. Before then it had carried no grand name at all, just a line in an observer's notebook about an oval in the southern belt. The storm had already turned for generations before it was so named, indifferent to what humans chose to call it, content to be crimson whether or not it bore the word. What all these visitors together have shown is that the crimson oval is no simple thing but a structure of staggering complexity, layered and roiling from its bright crown to its deep hidden roots. Spacecraft after spacecraft across half a century, each added another piece. The first faint photographs, the first moving pictures, the long patient orbits, the closest passes, the gravity that revealed the depths, the heat that revealed the energy hidden within. Bit by bit the portrait of the storm has grown richer, and yet it remains, even now, a wonder only partly understood, holding its deepest mysteries close, the way the oldest and most beautiful things always do. The storm carries itself, and has carried itself across all the long years before any spacecraft flew, and will carry itself across all the long years after. There is only the great turning in the dark, and your own slow breath, and the deep ease of letting the cosmos hold its wonders, while you let go of holding anything at all, sinking warmer into the quiet of where you lie. In the hush of that surrender, picture again how it would feel to stand beside the storm, though no living thing ever could. You would drift through a sky of perpetual twilight, the distant sun no brighter than a small fierce star, and before you the crimson wall of the Great Red Spot would rise like a continent set on its edge, curving away beyond sight in both directions. The clouds would stream past faster than any gale on Earth, yet so broad is the storm that the motion would seem almost stately, the way the hands of a great clock seem still until you watch them long enough. A wall of weather wider than your whole world, turning with the patience of something that measures time in centuries. The pressures within that storm climb to crushing extremes the deeper one descends, far beyond anything your world holds. At the cloud tops where the red is born, The air is thin and cold, but follow the storm down into its hidden roots, and the pressure mounts swiftly. The gases squeeze tighter and tighter until they grow as dense as liquid. There is no clear floor, no moment where atmosphere becomes ground, only a smooth, steady thickening, the air becoming soup, becoming syrup, becoming something with no name in earthly speech. The storm reaches down into this strange, deepening world and stirs it, a single rotation linking the cold, bright summit to the warm, dark below. And the whole of this storm rides upon a planet that spins faster than any other in the solar system, whirling through its day in less than 10 hours. Despite being the largest planet of all, vast enough to hold every other world combined, Jupiter turns so quickly that a single day there lasts under 10 hours from one sunrise to the next. To spin that fast, its equator must be racing along at some 28,000 miles an hour, a surface hurtling around far quicker than any cannon shot. This breakneck rotation is part of what shapes the storm and the bands alike, flinging the winds into their racing lanes, smearing the clouds into their horizontal stripes, lending the whole sky its swift and stately order. The great red spot turns once in 6 days, while the planet beneath it turns more than 14 times in that same span. That swift spinning even reshapes the giant's whole form, flattening it gently at the poles and bulging it wide at the equator. Jupiter is not a perfect sphere, but a slightly squashed one, its middle pushed outward by the speed of its turning, so that the distance across its equator is noticeably greater than the distance from pole to pole, a bulge of several thousand miles, plain enough to see in a good photograph of the planet's disk. If you could hold the planet in your hands, you would feel it to be not quite round, a little flattened, a little swollen at the waist, a great spinning drop of gas pulled subtly out of shape by its own restless motion. And across that swollen middle, in the southern lands, the red storm keeps its place among the bands. The light that touches the great red spot is a faint and distant thing, for the sun is far away across the cold. Jupiter orbits at more than 5 times the distance from the sun than your own world, so far out that sunlight arriving there is only a small fraction of what warms the Earth, perhaps a 25th as strong, the difference between a bright noon and a single candle in a wide dark room. The storm turns in a perpetual dimness, lit by a sun that hangs in its sky no larger than a brilliant point, and yet that faint light is still enough, over the long ages, to paint the clouds their deep and famous red. A storm dressed in crimson by a sun too distant to feel warm. Most of the storm's energy, then, comes not from that pale far light, but from within the planet itself, from a heat born deep in the giant's heart. Jupiter glows faintly with its own warmth, radiating more heat into space than it receives from the sun, a leftover fire from the planet's birth, and from the steady settling of its own immense bulk. This inner heat rises through the atmosphere, driving the winds, feeding the storms, keeping the great machine of weather turning from below. The great red spot, in part, is fueled by the planet's own ancient warmth, a storm kept alive by a fire that has burned, deep and steady, since the solar system was young. That birth fire reaches back unthinkably far, for Jupiter is nearly as old as the Sun itself, formed in the same vast cloud some 4.5 billion years ago. The giant gathered itself together from the leftover gas and dust of the newborn Sun, the first and largest of the planets to take shape, drawing in so much material so quickly that it was likely all but finished while the inner rocky worlds were still assembling. It swelled so great that its gravity shaped the orbits of all the worlds that followed, nudging and herding the young planets into the arrangement we know. The atmosphere in which the great red spot turns is, in its deeper sense, primordial, much of it the very same gas that swirled in the disk around the infant sun, hydrogen and helium that has never known any home but this giant. To gaze upon the storm is, in a quiet way, to gaze upon the breath of the early solar system, preserved and turning still. And the giant is made almost entirely of those two lightest gases, hydrogen and helium, the same elements that fill the stars. Jupiter has no solid ground to stand upon, no shore where atmosphere meets land. It is gas nearly all the way down, growing ever denser, until in its deepest interior the hydrogen is squeezed so hard that it behaves like a liquid metal, flowing and conducting in a vast hidden ocean no eye will ever see. Somewhere far below, deeper than the metal sea, there may be a dense core of rock and ice and heavier elements, many times the mass of the Earth, blurring slowly into the gas above it with no clear edge between them. The great red spot floats upon this strange world, its red roots reaching down toward depths where the very nature of matter changes, where the familiar gives way to the unimaginable. So immense is the giant, and so deep its ocean of gas, that within it your entire world is the smallest of things. More than 1,300 Earths could be poured inside Jupiter, and still the giant would not be full. Set side by side, 11 Earths would barely stretch across its face from one edge to the other. The great red spot, that single storm large enough to swallow your planet whole, is but one feature on the face of a world so enormous that worlds like yours are mere droplets within it. There is no fear in this immensity, only a wide and restful perspective, a sense of how gently small your whole life is against the turning of such a giant, and how that smallness is not a loss, but a release. For all that size, the giant holds itself together by a force so strong that nothing on its surface ever truly settles. Jupiter's gravity is the mightiest of any planet, more than twice as strong as the pull you feel beneath your feet, so that a person who somehow stood at its cloud tops would feel their own body grown suddenly more than double its earthly weight, gripping the deep atmosphere and binding its storms and shaping its many moons. It is this powerful grip that gives the planet its crushing depths and its swift, stable bands, that holds the great red spot rooted in its place while it creeps westward through the years. A grip strong enough to have ruled the solar system since its earliest days, and gentle enough somehow to let a single storm turn quietly upon its face for centuries. So great is the giant's bulk that it outweighs every other planet of the sun combined, and then far more besides. If you gathered up all the other worlds, the small rocky ones, the distant ice giants, the ringed neighbour, and weighed them together against Jupiter alone, the giant would still be more than twice as heavy as all of them put together. The great red spot turns upon the most massive planet by far, a world whose weight dominates the whole family of the sun, a thing so grand that everything else combined cannot match it. The roots of the storm reach deeper than the entire span of your own world, plunging into the giant far beyond any earthly scale. The hundreds of miles the great red spot descends would be a startling depth on Earth, deeper than the deepest ocean trench, deeper than any mine or borehole humanity has ever made. Yet on the giant, those same hundreds of miles are merely the storm's shallow beginning, a thin skin upon an atmosphere that sinks thousands of miles further still. The storm's roots, vast by every earthly measure, are but the topmost threads of something deeper yet, a reminder of how the giant dwarfs all familiar scales. To watch the storm through a telescope is to see it drift visibly across the giant's face in the space of a single evening. Because Jupiter turns so swiftly, in under 10 hours, a patient watcher gazing through an eyepiece can actually see the great red spot move, carried by the planet's rotation from one side of the disk toward the other over the course of a few hours. Settle in for an evening's watch, and the storm will not stay still. It will glide across the giant before your eyes, a visible drift that reveals the planet's quick turning. In an hour or two, you can watch it travel a noticeable way across the disk, and in a single long night see it appear at one edge and slide most of the way to the other. Few sights so directly let you watch another world spin, the crimson eye gliding across the banded face. And the storm has been turning in all likelihood since before the telescope that first revealed it was even invented. The instrument that let humanity see the great red spot is only some 4 centuries old, yet the storm itself may be older still, already churning in the giant's clouds before the first lens was ground to look at it. The tool that found the storm is younger than the storm it found. a humbling thought that the wonder waited, patient and unseen, for human eyes to invent the means to glimpse it at last. The storm kept its crimson watch long before anyone could know, and only lately has anyone learned to look. Far beneath the visible storm, where no light has ever reached, the atmosphere thickens into realms so deep that pressure itself becomes a kind of solid sea. As the great red spot's roots descend, they pass through layers no instrument has ever sampled directly, regions where the temperature climbs and the gases grow dense beyond any earthly comparison. The probe that fell into Jupiter long ago lasted not even an hour before the deepening weight silenced it, and it had barely begun the descent. The true floor of the storm, if floor is even the word, lies far below where any human machine has ever reached, a hidden country sensed only through the faint whisper of gravity and the patient logic of physics. Within those depths, the chemistry grows strange and rich, brewing molecules in combinations your skies have never known. Deep in Jupiter's clouds, beneath the visible red, lie layers thought to hold water and ammonia and sulfur compounds, mingling under pressures that would crush any earthly vessel. Lower still, the temperature climbs, and the pressure mounts until, hundreds of miles down, the air grows hotter than molten rock and heavier than the sea. Yet some scientists suspect that in the warmer middle depths, there may be a narrow band where the temperature passes through something almost mild, a layer hidden between the freezing summit and the scorching deep, where water could in principle be liquid and the conditions for a moment are nearly Earth-like. The great red spot stirs this hidden chemistry, dredging material upward from the dark and exposing it to the distant sun, where it reddens and reveals for a moment the secret ingredients of the deep. It is from such depths that the storm's colour may ultimately rise, lifted from below and transformed in the light. The leading thought is that the red-making chemicals are born when material from far down is carried up into the storm's high reaches, where the sun's ultraviolet rays break it apart and remake it into ruddy pigments. The very centre of the great red spot, where the air rises highest and stays longest in that punishing light, tends to glow the deepest red, while the edges fade toward orange and cream. The storm is, in this sense, a patient painter, mixing its colours from the chemistry of the abyss and the radiation of the void, refreshing its crimson endlessly as it turns. The exact shade of that crimson, you may be surprised to learn, drifts and changes over the years like a slow tide of colour. The great red spot is not always equally red. Across the decades, observers have watched it deepen to a vivid brick, then fade to a pale salmon, then darken again, its colour breathing in and out over years and decades for reasons not fully understood. Sometimes it grows so faint that it nearly vanishes into the surrounding clouds, only to return, blushing once more into prominence. The most famous storm in all the heavens does not hold a single fixed face, but shifts its hue like a living thing, a great red mood passing across the giant sky. What makes that colour all the more striking is how rare such deep red is among the pale clouds that surround it. Most of Jupiter's sky is dressed in soft whites and gentle tans, the cool hues of ammonia ice catching the distant light, and against this muted backdrop the crimson of the great red spot blazes like a single ember on a field of ash. It is the boldest splash of colour on the whole giant, a lone deep red set into endless pale bands, one vivid eye of warmth glowing amid the cool of the surrounding clouds. There have even been times when the storm grew so pale that those who watched it wondered if it might be fading away for good. In certain years the red drained from the great oval until it became little more than a faint outline, a ghost of its former vividness, held in place only by the swirl of the winds, and then, after a season or several, the colour seeped back, the storm reasserting its deep rose against the pale clouds. These fadings and returns are part of why the storm has fascinated watchers for so long. It keeps changing, keeps surprising, never quite settling into the same appearance twice, a centuries-old wonder that still refuses to grow predictable. Around the great storm, the surrounding clouds sometimes flush with colour too, as though the giant's whole face responds to hidden weather. In recent years, astronomers have watched broad reddish bands appear and disappear in the latitudes near the Great Red Spot, sweeping changes in colour rolling across whole stripes of the planet, brightening and darkening over months. These global shifts in Jupiter's appearance, sometimes called colour revolutions, ripple through the bands like long seasons, transforming the planet's familiar face for a time before it settles again. The Great Red Spot turns at the heart of a world that is always, subtly, repainting itself. Now and then the storm even sheds flakes of itself, casting off curls of red cloud that drift away and dissolve. In recent observations, watchers have seen great streamers and blades of red peel away from the edge of the Great Red Spot, spiralling off into the surrounding currents before fading into the brighter clouds. For a moment it can look almost alarming, as though the storm were unravelling, losing pieces of its substance to the wind. Yet the storm endures, knitting itself whole again, its core untroubled by the loss of a few outer threads. These flakings may be part of how it shrinks, or merely the ordinary fraying of so huge a thing, gentle reminders that even the mightier storm is always, quietly, in flux, and smaller storms still are forever being drawn into its embrace, swallowed at the rim and woven into its turning. The storm does not merely sit among the clouds, it interacts with them, pulling in lesser swirls that wander too near its edge, absorbing their energy, growing renewed by what it consumes. Spacecraft have watched small white storms approach the Great Red Boundary and be caught, stretched, and spun along the rim before vanishing into the larger rotation. In this way, the storm feeds upon the weather around it, a great wheel turning lesser wheels into itself, and this constant nourishment may be part of why it has lasted so improbably long. Even the way the winds organise themselves around the Great Red Spot reveals a deep and hidden order. The two opposing jet streams that cradle the storm do not merely pass it by, they bend and curl around its great oval, deflected by its bulk, weaving the whole region into a single linked system of flow. The storm shapes the winds even as the winds shape the storm, each holding the other in a long embrace that has lasted for centuries. It is a partnership older than any human institution, a balance of forces so finely struck that it has held its shape across all the long years anyone has watched, turning steadily in the southern clouds. Far from the Great Red Spot, high overhead, Jupiter wears a crown of light brighter than any seen on Earth. At Jupiter's poles, the most powerful auroras in the solar system shimmer and blaze, towering curtains of glowing light wrapped around the planet's magnetic crown. These are like Earth's northern lights, but mightier beyond comparison, glowing not only in colours the eye can see, but pouring out in ultraviolet and X-ray light, fed by the planet's tremendous magnetism and by particles streaming from its volcanic moon. Unlike Earth's auroras, which flare up only when the sun sends a gust of particles our way, Jupiter's never go dark. They burn on always, fueled from within the giant's own spinning field. Picture those great rings of light, far brighter than any aurora your sky has shown, encircling the poles while the red storm turns serenely far below. That light is born of a magnetic force so immense it dwarfs the planet itself, reaching far out into space. Jupiter's magnetic field is the strongest of any planet, many times mightier than Earth's, stretching so far that if it glowed to the eye it would appear in your night sky larger than the full moon, despite the giant lying hundreds of millions of miles away. Its long magnetic tail streams away from the sun across such a distance that it brushes the orbit of Saturn, a wake of invisible force trailing behind the planet for hundreds of millions of miles. This great field shields the planet, traps charged particles into fierce belts of radiation, strong enough to harm any visiting machine, and shapes the auroras that crown the poles. The Great Red Spot turns within the embrace of this enormous magnetism, a storm of cloud nested inside a storm of force. That magnetism in turn is generated by the strange metal ocean hidden in the planet's depths. Far beneath the Great Red Spot's deepest roots, the pressure grows so extreme that hydrogen is squeezed into a liquid that conducts electricity like a metal, an enormous churning sea of metallic hydrogen flowing in the planet's interior. As this electric ocean moves, it generates the colossal magnetic field that wraps the whole giant. The crimson storm you picture floating on the surface and the great auroras crowning the poles are, in the end, expressions of the same hidden engine, the same deep turning sea no eye will ever witness. The planet's spin and that deep sea together drive everything you see upon the face of Jupiter. The swift rotation flings the winds into their racing bands. The inner heat rises to feed the storms. The metal ocean conjures the magnetism, and all of it interlocks into a single great system of which the Great Red Spot is the most beautiful visible part. Nothing on the giant stands alone. Every storm, every stripe, every shimmer of aurora is woven into the same turning whole. To rest your gaze upon the great red eye is to touch one bright thread of a tapestry that runs from the cloud tops to the metal heart, all of it moving, all of it linked. Around this immense world circle dozens upon dozens of moons, a small solar system of their own. Jupiter is attended by an enormous family of moons, more than 90 known, and likely more yet to be found, ranging from giant worlds in their own right down to tiny captured fragments of rock. The 4 largest are great moons that even a humble telescope can reveal, each a world unto itself, and they have wheeled around the giant for billions of years. While the Great Red Spot turns upon the planet, these moons trace their patient circles around it, casting their tiny shadows now and then upon the striped clouds below. Those 4 great moons were among the very first new worlds humanity ever discovered beyond its own, glimpsed through one of the earliest telescopes. When an astronomer in the early 17th century turned his small handmade telescope toward Jupiter, he saw 4 faint points of light beside it, and watched them shift from night to night, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sliding back and forth and even vanishing as they passed behind the planet, until he understood at last that they were moons circling the giant. His telescope was a humble thing, no more powerful than a modern pair of binoculars, and yet through it he saw what no human had ever seen. It was a discovery that quietly shattered an old certainty, that not everything in the heavens turned around the earth, and it arrived in the same era when the Great Red Spot itself was first being noted in the clouds. The giant, it seems, has long been a teacher of humility. The nearest of those great moons is the most volcanic world in the entire solar system, ceaselessly erupting. This moon, racing closest to Jupiter, is squeezed and flexed by the giant's enormous gravity until its interior melts, and from its surface burst hundreds of volcanoes, throwing plumes of sulfur and fire dozens, sometimes hundreds, of miles up into space, fountains so tall they rise clear of the little world that makes them. It is from this fiery moon that many of the particles feeding Jupiter's great auroras come, flung off into the magnetic field and swept toward the poles. While the great storm turns serene and crimson, this small moon nearby blazes and erupts without rest, the most violently alive surface known. Another of those moons hides an ocean of liquid water beneath a shell of ice, more water than all the seas of Earth. Beneath the cracked frozen crust of this moon lies a global ocean, dark and deep, kept liquid by the same tidal flexing that melts its fiery sibling, holding perhaps twice as much water as every ocean on your own world combined. It is one of the places in the solar system where some imagine life might quietly exist, in the lightless sea beneath the ice. While the Great Red Spot rages dry and crimson above, one of its sister moons cradles a silent dark ocean, vast beyond reckoning, hidden from every eye. The largest of all the moons is itself bigger than the smallest planet, a giant among satellites. This greatest of Jupiter's moons is so large that it exceeds the size of the planet Mercury, a moon you could rightly call a world, and it is the only moon known to generate its own magnetic field, a tiny echo of the giant's own. It too is thought to cradle a hidden ocean of salt water beneath its surface, layered between shells of ice sealed away in the cold and the dark. Around the storm-crowned giant, then, circle worlds that would be marvels in their own right were they not overshadowed by the great planet they attend. A fiery moon, an ocean moon, a moon larger than a planet, all wheeling past the turning red eye. From the surface of those moons, the giant would loom enormous in the sky, filling the heavens far beyond anything you have ever seen above your own home. Were you to stand upon the icy crust of one of the inner moons, Jupiter would hang overhead many times wider than the full moon appears from Earth, an immense banded face draped across the sky, the great red spot sweeping across it as the giant turned. Imagine that sight, a whole striped world filling the heavens, its crimson storm drifting grandly past, never setting, always there, a presence so immense it would shape every day and night upon the moon below. The storm that is a faint speck from Earth would be a sovereign of the sky from there. And from those moons, the giant would never move from its place in the sky, hanging forever fixed above one face of the world. Because the great moons keep the same side turned always toward the giant, an observer upon one of them would see Jupiter hold perfectly still overhead, neither rising nor setting, fixed in a single spot of the heavens while the stars wheeled slowly behind it. The great red spot would still drift across the giant's banded face as the planet turned, a crimson eye crossing a stationary world in the sky. To live there would be to know a giant that never moved, a constant banded companion forever watching from one quarter of the dark. The gentle company of those moons can drift through your mind now, points of light circling the great storm-bearer in their slow and faithful rounds. There is a deep peace in such company, in knowing the giant does not turn alone, that it is attended through the long dark by a family of patient worlds, and peace too, in letting yourself be small and still among such vastness, neither holding nor grasping, only resting, while the storm turns and the moons circle and the night gathers softly closer around the warmth of where you lie. Turn back to the storm itself, and to the strange truth that it casts a shadow upon a world without ground. Because the great red spot rises miles above the surrounding clouds, lifted into the thin upper air, it can throw a faint shadow across the cloud deck below it, a soft darkening cast by a storm onto storm, by cloud onto cloud. There is something dreamlike in the very idea, a shadow falling not upon land or sea but upon other clouds, a shape of dimness drifting beneath the great red plateau as it sails westward through the bands. Even shadow takes on a gentle strangeness in the sky of the giant. The very edges of the storm, where the racing winds meet the slower air, fold into intricate curls and waves of breathtaking detail. Along the storm's boundary, the closest cameras have revealed delicate filaments and swirls, tiny eddies spinning off the great rotation, ripples and ribbons of cloud caught in the sheer between the storm and the streams around it. It is a place of endless fine pattern, fractal and flowing, each small curl giving birth to smaller curls still, a fringe of intricate lace around the great crimson wheel. Up close, the storm is not smooth at all but woven from countless threads of turning air. Within the storm, the rising air at its centre carries cloud upward into the cold, building the great raised dome that gives it height. At the heart of the great red spot, the air ascends, lifting material from below toward the chilly summit, where it spreads outward and forms the storm's lofty plateau. This upwelling at the core is part of why the centre is calm and the rim is fierce. The air rises gently in the middle, then is flung outward to race along the edges. It is the breathing of the storm, an endless, slow inhalation at its heart, lifting the deep chemistry skyward to be painted red in the light. The temperature across the storm varies in ways that map its hidden structure, cold at the high crown and warmer toward the edges. Instruments that read the heat of the great red spot have found its lofty centre to be among the coldest regions of the visible clouds, chilled by its great height, while warmer air lies lower and around its rim. By reading these patterns of warmth and cold, scientists can trace the shape of the storm in 3 dimensions, mapping its raised dome and its descending edges through the temperatures alone. The storm wears its structure in its warmth, a hidden topography written in heat across the crimson clouds. Above the visible red, in the thin high haze, faint cloud features sometimes drift over the storm like a veil. There exists a layer of high, hazy cloud above the great red spot, and within it, wispy formations occasionally appear, riding the upper winds in a different direction from the storm below. It is as though the storm wears a thin and shifting shawl, a faint upper weather laid over its deep crimson body, the 2 layers sliding past one another in the high cold air. The giant skies layered upon layer, weather above weather, each turning to its own slow rhythm. The whole storm sits within the southern half of the planet, a single great eye gazing out from the lower hemisphere. The great red spot has kept to Jupiter's southern latitudes throughout all the years it has been watched, never wandering north of the equator, anchored in its band among the southern bands. It is a southern phenomenon, a feature of the lower half of the giant striped face, and the matching latitudes in the north have never produced a twin to rival it. Why the south should host such a storm and the north should not is one more gentle puzzle, folded into the great red mystery. For all its singular fame, the great red spot may not be the only long-lived storm the giant has ever held, only the one we happen to be watching. Storms come and go on Jupiter across timescales longer than human records, and it is possible that other great spots have turned in ages past, before there were eyes to see them, rising and lasting and finally fading away in the deep currents of the giant sky. The one you picture now may be the latest in a long lineage of such storms, or it may be uniquely persistent. Either way, a reminder that you are watching a single moment in a story far longer than any life. A story the giant tells slowly to itself across the ages. Few realize that the giant wears rings of its own, faint and dark, far dimmer than the bright bands of its more famous neighbour. Jupiter is encircled by a thin, dusky ring system, made not of glittering ice but of fine, dark dust, so faint that it went undiscovered until a passing spacecraft glimpsed it from behind. Backlit by the distant sun, the whole halo lit up only when seen against the light. These rings are thought to be fed by dust knocked off the small inner moons by tiny meteorite strikes, the debris spreading into faint hoops that circle the planet's middle. The great red spot turns far below this gossamer halo, the bright storm and the shadowy rings, 2 very different ornaments of the same giant world, one bold and crimson, one barely there at all. The energy bound up in the storm strains the imagination, a reservoir of motion gathered across centuries. A single hurricane on Earth holds a fearsome power, yet it lives only days. The great red spot has held its winds for the better part of human history, drawing fresh energy continuously from the giant beneath it. To hold such speed across such a span, to keep hundreds of miles an hour winds turning for centuries without pause, is a feat of accumulated power no earthly storm could ever match. The crimson eye is not merely large but profoundly, patiently energetic, a slow engine of immense and ceaseless force, dressed in the softest of colours. For all that hidden power, the storm has long held a gentle place in the human imagination, a familiar face in the sky's far reaches. Generations of stargazers have learned to find the great red spot in their telescopes as a rite of passage, a first glimpse of weather on another world. It has appeared in countless drawings and paintings and photographs, become a symbol of the giant itself, the one feature almost anyone can name. There is a quiet warmth in that long familiarity, in a storm so distant and so strange, having become, across the centuries, an old and cherished acquaintance of the human eye, a crimson friend turning faithfully in the dark. And the storm keeps a curious sort of time, turning once in roughly the span of a long week. Where the giant itself spins in under 10 hours, the great red spot rotates far more slowly, completing a single full turn in about 6 of your days, a leisurely revolution for so vast a thing. If you could watch it sped up across those days, you would see its curls and filaments wheel grandly around once, a great slow hand sweeping the face of an enormous clock. It measures its own time gently, this storm, turning at the pace of weeks while the planet beneath it races through its short, swift days. It is humbling and softly freeing to consider how much of that story unfolds entirely without witness. The great red spot turned for unknown years before any telescope found it, and it will turn for unknown years after the last watcher looks away. Most of its existence has passed and will pass in perfect solitude, unobserved, indifferent to whether any mind ever knew it at all, and yet it is no less beautiful for being unseen. There is a deep gift in that thought, that wonder does not require a witness, that beauty turns on in the dark whether or not anyone is there to name it, that the universe is full of marvels content to exist unremarked. You too may rest unremarked tonight, asking nothing of the world and offering nothing back, simply existing as the storm exists, turning gently through the dark hours. There is no task here, no watcher you must satisfy, no fact you must hold. Let yourself be as the great red eye is, present, slow, untroubled, complete in itself, needing no observer to justify its turning. And in that easy solitude let your breath grow softer still, your body heavier, the warmth around you deeper, while the storm keeps its silent ancient rotation far beyond your peaceful dark. The giant's atmosphere holds other lesser spots and swirls beyond the famous red one, a whole population of storms. Across Jupiter's clouds drift countless smaller storms, white ovals, brown barges, small cyclones and anticyclones turning in the bands, some lasting years, others fading in weeks. The great red spot is merely the grandest and most enduring of a vast family of swirls that decorate the giant's face. To look closely at Jupiter is to find storms within storms, eddies within bands, a sky so crowded with weather that the great red one, for all its fame, is but the first among a multitude. At Jupiter's poles the storms gather into astonishing geometric patterns, clusters of cyclones arranged with strange precision. When a spacecraft first looked down upon the giant's poles, it found not chaos but order. Great cyclones arranged in neat polygons, 8 storms ringing a central one at the North Pole, and 5 ringing a central one at the south, each great whirl 1,000 miles across or more, holding their formation year after year without scattering. These polar patterns are unlike anything on Earth, a hidden geometry written in storm, far from the great red spot's southern home. The giant, it turns out, is full of such surprising order, weather that arranges itself into shapes no one expected. Those polar cyclones hold their tidy formation with a stability that mirrors the great storm's own endurance. Year after year, the polygons of cyclones at Jupiter's poles keep their shape, each storm holding its place in the ring, neither merging nor scattering, a frozen dance of immense swirls locked in geometric balance. It is the same deep tendency toward order that lets the bands hold their lanes and the great red spot keep its centuries-long turning, a planet whose fury, looked at closely, resolves into patterns of remarkable steadiness. Beneath the chaos, the giant keeps a hidden and abiding order. The colours of all these storms, the red and the white and the brown, encode the heights of the clouds and the chemistry within. On Jupiter, the hue of a storm tells of its altitude and its contents. The white ovals are high, cold clouds of fresh ammonia ice. The brown features lie lower in warmer air, and the deep red of the great red spot marks chemistry cooked by the distant sun at the storm's lofty crown. To read the colours of the giant's clouds is to read a map of their heights and their making, a painting that is also a diagram, beauty that doubles as information. The giant's clouds are arranged in layers, each at its own height and made of its own substance, stacked like a hidden architecture. Beneath the visible ammonia clouds lie thought to be deeper decks of ammonium hydrosulfide, And below those, far down, layers of water cloud, each forming at its own depth as the pressure and temperature change. The topmost deck, the white ammonia ice you see, floats where the air is bitterly cold. The water clouds hide perhaps 50 miles below it, in a warmer, denser dark. The great red spot reaches through these layers, its deep roots passing down through the stacked decks of cloud, linking the bright crimson summit to the hidden water clouds far below. The giant sky is built in stories, a layered tower of weather, and the storm threads through them all. Among those deep layers, water itself may fall as rain or even hail in storms far below the visible clouds. Deep in Jupiter's atmosphere, where water clouds form, there may be lightning and rain, and some scientists believe that in the violent updrafts, water and ammonia freeze together into a slushy hail that falls through the deep clouds, strange storms within the storm, hidden far beneath the red. Lightning has indeed been detected flickering in Jupiter's deep clouds, brief flashes in the dark below the bands. The giant rains and thunders in its hidden depths, a weather no eye will ever witness, far beneath the calm red eye above. That deep lightning flickers in the clouds far below, brief sparks in the giant's hidden night. Spacecraft have recorded flashes of lightning deep within Jupiter's water clouds, glimmers of light born in the turbulent depths, evidence of storms raging far beneath the visible surface. These flashes belong to the same vast weather system that holds the crimson oval aloft, the giant's atmosphere alive with electricity from its bright summit to its dark, deep clouds. Picture those distant sparks far below the red, flickering in the deep, a quiet lightning that no one will ever stand beneath. That lightning hints at water hidden far down in the giant, water the storm helps stir from the depths. For a long time, scientists were unsure how much water lay within Jupiter, for it hides beneath the visible clouds, but the spacecraft that flew low across the planet listened for it and found that the deep atmosphere holds more water than once believed. Gathered in clouds far below the bands, the great red spot reaching down through these layers mingles with the moist, deep air, lifting traces of it skyward in its slow circulation. Hidden water, deep beneath a dry red summit, one more secret the storm helps draw, little by little, toward the light. The flashes of deep lightning come not in the gentle patter of an earthly shower, but in rare, immense strokes spread across vast reaches of cloud. Jupiter's lightning, born so far below, is thought to be powerful and widely scattered, great bolts flickering in the deep dark at intervals, lighting the hidden water clouds from within like distant lanterns glimpsed through fog. There is something dreamlike in imagining it, a silent giant, its surface calm and crimson above, its hidden depths flickering now and then with slow flashes of light no eye will ever witness directly. The storm turns serene above a deep and quietly luminous dark. The deepest clouds of all may hold a strange and lovely substance, a soft slush falling endlessly through the giant's middle reaches. Some who study the planet suspect that where powerful currents lift the deep air, water and ammonia bind into a mushy, half-frozen hail, vast and slow, drifting down through the lower clouds in a way no earthly weather can match. These soft-falling masses, sometimes imagined as a kind of mushy ammonia water hail, would sink through the deep atmosphere far below the great red spot, a hidden snowfall in the warm dark. Picture that endless settling, soft and slow, somewhere deep beneath the red. All of this weather, the red storm, the white ovals, the polar polygons, the deep lightning, turns together as one immense connected system. Nothing on the giant happens in isolation. The bands feed the storms shed into the bands, the deep heat rises to power it all, and the whole atmosphere churns as a single living machine whose loveliest visible expression is the great crimson storm itself. To understand the storm is to understand the giant, and to understand the giant is to glimpse a weather system vaster and more intricate than any mind can fully hold. Let your thoughts drift among all those storms now, the great and the small, the bright and the deep, as your mind grows soft and slow. There is no need to follow any of them, no need to hold a single swirl. They turn on without you, the whole giant alive with whether it will keep weather watched or not. And so you may release your hold on watching and sink into the warm dark, while far away the great red eye turns among its countless lesser kin, and the night gathers close, and sleep draws nearer with every slowing breath. Picture the storm as it was first sketched by hand, long before any camera, drawn in ink by candlelight. The earliest records of the Great Red Spot are not photographs but drawings, careful sketches made by astronomers peering through brass telescopes and rendering what they saw with pen and paper. Across the centuries, these hand-drawn records trace the storm's changing size and colour, a chronicle of crimson rendered in fading ink. There is something tender in those old drawings, the great storm captured by patient human hands, observers across the ages each adding their careful sketch to the long visual story of the giant's eye. Those old observers measured the storm's slow drift around the planet by timing exactly when it crossed the centre of the disk. Because Jupiter has no solid surface to mark its rotation, astronomers tracked the Great Red Spot itself, noting the precise moment it passed the meridian of the planet's face, and from these timings they charted how it drifted around the giant over the years. It was painstaking work, a watcher noting the storm's passage night after night, building from countless careful observations a picture of its slow wandering. The storm became, in a sense, a great clock by which the giant's turning could be read. Through such patient watching, astronomers learned that the storm's drift is not perfectly steady, but quickens and slows over time. It does not creep around the planet at an even pace. It speeds and lingers, its westward drift varying across the decades for reasons tied to the deep currents beneath it. These subtle changes in its wandering offer clues to the hidden flows in the atmosphere below the visible clouds, the storm acting as a float upon a sea whose deep currents shift unseen. Even its drift carries information, a wandering that whispers of the depths. The storm's longevity makes it a rare window into a single weather system observed across human history, a thing almost unique in science. There is hardly anything else in nature that a person can study knowing it is the very same individual feature their distant predecessors watched centuries before. The same storm, continuously turning, observed across the whole modern age of astronomy. It offers a continuity of study found nowhere else, a single subject followed faithfully through generations of watchers. To add one's own observation to that long chain is to join hands, across time, with every astronomer who ever traced the Great Red Oval. Much of that long chain has been forged not by great observatories, but by patient amateurs, ordinary stargazers watching from their gardens. To this day, dedicated skywatchers around the world turn modest telescopes toward Jupiter night after night, sketching and photographing the Great Red Spot, tracking its drift and its changing colour, contributing observations that professional scientists genuinely use. Because the giant is so large and so bright, and because no single observatory can watch it every hour of every night, these scattered amateur watchers fill the gaps, catching sudden changes and passing storms the professionals would otherwise miss. The storm is watched by a quiet global fellowship of the curious, each adding their small, careful glimpse to the whole. There is a gentle democracy in that, a wonder so grand yet open to anyone willing to look, its long record built in part by the love of countless unhurried eyes. The storm keeps to a particular band of the giant southern sky, drifting always near the same gentle latitude. The Great Red Spot has lingered for all its watched history around 22 degrees south of Jupiter's equator, held there between its cradling jet streams, never straying far north or south, even as it wanders around the globe. Drift it does, though. Over the long decades, it has slid the whole way around the planet many times in longitude, lapping the giant again and again, and yet in latitude it has barely budged. It is anchored north to south, though free to roam east to west, fixed to its band as a boat is fixed to its current, sliding along but never leaving its lane. This faithful keeping to one latitude is part of the storm's deep stability, a constancy of place woven into its constancy of being. Just ahead of the storm, the clouds part into a pale notch, a soft hollow that the great oval seems forever to be sailing toward. Astronomers have long noted a bright indentation in the cloud band just to the west of the Great Red Spot, a place where the dark belt gives way and pales, sometimes called the hollow into which the storm nestles. As the storm drifts westward, it appears to press into this gentle gap, the bright hollow cradling the leading edge of the crimson oval. It is a small and tender detail, this pale notch in the clouds, a soft place in the giant's banding that has accompanied the storm across the years, and the most patient measurements have caught the storm subtly quickening, its winds gathering pace across recent decades. The great telescope in orbit, watching year upon year, has measured the high-altitude winds racing along the storm's outer edge, speeding up slightly over time, even as the great oval itself shrinks. It is a small change, a gentle acceleration, yet it deepens the mystery of the storm's future, whether this quickening signals a storm gathering itself or one slowly transforming. The crimson eye keeps changing in ways too subtle for any single glance, revealed only to those who watch across the patient span of years. Modern watchers continue that long tradition, with telescopes far beyond the dreams of those early sketchers. Today, the Great Red Spot is observed by great observatories on the ground and by telescopes in space, watched in many colours of light, its winds and temperatures measured with a precision the old astronomers could never have imagined. And yet the essential act is the same, a watcher turning their gaze to the giant and recording the Great Red Storm, adding another page to a chronicle now centuries long. The tools have grown vast, but the wonder remains the same as it was by candlelight. One great telescope orbiting above the Earth has watched the storm for decades, returning again and again to chart its slow changes. From its perch above the atmosphere, this orbiting observatory has photographed the Great Red Spot year after year, building a long and precise record of its shrinking, its changing colour, its quickening winds. These repeated portraits, taken from above the blur of Earth's air, have revealed the storm's slow transformations with a clarity the ground could never match. The giant's eye, watched faithfully from orbit, has yielded its secrets little by little to this patient mechanical observer. By comparing these many portraits across the years, scientists watch the storm change in slow motion, as though flipping through the pages of a long, slow book. Laid side by side, the images from year to year reveal the Great Red Spot growing smaller, rounder, and at times deeper in colour, its transformation unfolding too slowly for any single glance to catch, but plain across the span of decades. It is a kind of time-lapse measured not in seconds but in years, the storm's long life compressed into a sequence of careful frames. The giant changes, the record holds the change, and the watchers read it like a story told across generations. The storm's slow shrinking has lent some urgency to the watching, a sense of witnessing something that may not last forever. Because the Great Oval has been contracting across the past century, those who study it watch with a particular care, aware that they may be witnessing a storm in its long decline, gathering every measurement while the Great Oval still turns in fullness. There is no alarm in this, only a gentle attentiveness, the wish to know a beautiful thing well while it lasts. To watch the storm now is to watch with the soft awareness that even the most enduring wonders are not promised forever. And yet the storm has surprised its watchers before, fading and returning, shrinking and steadying, defying every confident prediction. Time and again, those who study the Great Red Spot have expected it to vanish, only to see it endure, have measured its decline, only to watch it stabilize, have called its colour faded, only to see it deepen again. It keeps its own counsel, this great storm, unfolding on its own slow terms, indifferent to the expectations of those who watch. There is a quiet delight in that stubbornness, in a wonder that refuses to behave as predicted, keeping its mysteries and its surprises folded close. Let the long human story of watching rest softly around you now. All those patient eyes across the centuries turn toward the same crimson eye. You need not watch tonight, need not measure or record or predict. The storm has been seen by so many across so long that it asks nothing more of you than rest. Release the watching to all those who came before, and simply lie in the warm dark while the great red wonder turns on, faithful and surprising, far beyond the reach of any single night, and sleep draws nearer with every easy breath. Imagine the storm not as a flat marking, but as a great three-dimensional sculpture of air, towering and rooted at once. At its summit, the crimson oval lifts several miles over the clouds around it, and at its base it plunges hundreds of miles into the depths, so that its true shape is not an oval drawn on a surface, but an immense lens of turning air, broad and tall and deep, suspended in the giant's atmosphere. To see only its red face is to see only one slice of a vast and hidden form, a sculpture of wind whose full dimensions reach far above and far below the painted surface you picture. The storm is deeper and taller than it is wide. That hidden form turns as a single coherent whole, the summit and the roots rotating together through the depths. The whole immense lens of the great red spot from its lofty crown to its deep base turns as one structure, the cloud tops and the hidden roots spinning together in slow union, linked through hundreds of miles of atmosphere. It is a feat of staggering coherence, that a column of air so tall and so deep should hold together and turn as one across the centuries, neither shearing apart nor unravelling in the surrounding currents. The storm is a single great pillar of rotation, whole from top to bottom. The energy that drives this turning column comes from many sources woven together, from sunlight and inner heat, and the meeting of the winds. The great red spot is fed by the friction of the opposing jet streams that cradle it, by the warmth rising from the planet's own interior, by the swallowing of smaller storms at its rim, and by the subtle energies of the deep. No single source powers it. Rather, it draws upon the whole living machine of the giant's atmosphere, gathering its sustenance from many quiet streams. This is part of why it lasts. Fed from everywhere, it is not easily starved, a storm nourished by the entire world it turns upon. Within the storm, the air moves in a great spiralling path, rising at the centre and sinking at the edges in an endless slow circulation. Deep in the core of the crimson oval, air ascends from below, rising to the cold summit where it spreads outward and is flung along the racing rim, before sinking again toward the storm's edges to begin the cycle anew. It is a vast and patient overturning, a circulation that lifts material from the depths, paints it in the light, and returns it downward, around and around, the slow respiration of a storm wide enough to hold whole worlds. Picture that spiral, rising and turning and sinking as endless as the night. The boundary of the storm where it meets the surrounding winds is a place of fierce and beautiful conflict, smoothed into grace. Along the outer edge of the crimson oval, the storm's racing winds collide with the opposing jet streams, and in that meeting the air is sheared and stretched and torn into countless small eddies and curls. Yet from a distance, all the conflict resolves into the smooth and stately edge of the great oval, the violence at the boundary hidden within the storm's serene larger shape. It is fury woven into calm, chaos gathered into grace, the turbulent rim held within the patient whole. The storm interacts with the bands that pass it, slowing some currents and deflecting others, shaping the flow of the whole region. As the jet streams approach the great oval, they must bend around its bulk, and in doing so the storm reshapes the winds for a great distance around itself, creating a region of altered flow that extends far beyond its visible edge. The storm is not a passive marking, but an active presence in the giant sky, bending the currents, shaping the weather around it, a great red lord that orders the flow of its neighbourhood. Its influence reaches well past the crimson clouds the eye can see. In this way, the storm and the bands have shaped each other across the centuries, each holding the other in a long mutual dance. The opposing jet streams cradle and spin the great red spot, while the storm in turn deflects and orders those same jet streams, the two locked in a balance so finely struck that it has endured for all the long years anyone has watched. Neither could be quite what it is without the other. The storm needs the winds to turn it, and the winds are shaped by the storm they turn. It is a partnership of immense forces, held in graceful equilibrium across the ages. That equilibrium is delicate and deep at once, easily imagined as fragile yet proven across centuries to be remarkably robust. One might think a storm so vast balanced between racing winds would be easily disturbed, and yet the great red spot has held its balance through everything the giant sky has thrown at it. Passing storms, shifting colours, swallowed eddies, the slow changes of the bands. Its stability is not the stillness of something fixed, but the dynamic balance of something always moving, always adjusting, always finding its centre anew. It is steady the way a spinning top is steady, kept upright by its own ceaseless motion. There is a quiet wisdom hidden in that kind of steadiness, the balance that comes not from stillness but from gentle, ceaseless motion. The great red spot does not endure by holding rigidly still. It endures by turning, by flowing, by constantly rebalancing itself against the winds around it. Its permanence is made of motion, its constancy woven from change. Perhaps there is comfort in that for a drifting mind, that to last is not to freeze but to keep gently moving, to find one's centre again and again, to turn on softly through whatever currents come. Picture how the storm would look in the strange light of other wavelengths, glowing in colours the eye was never made to see. In ultraviolet light, the great red spot appears especially dark and absorbing, drinking in the high-energy rays. In infrared, it glows with the warmth of its own structure. In the methane bands of light, its lofty summit stands out bright against the lower clouds. The storm wears a different face in each kind of light, a whole gallery of hidden portraits invisible to human eyes, revealed only through instruments that see what people cannot. There are many storms in the one storm, each painted in a different light. In the light absorbed by methane, the storm's great height is laid bare, its tall summit shining where the lower clouds fall dark. Because the great red spot rises so high above the surrounding cloud deck, it stands above much of the methane haze that darkens the lower atmosphere. And so in this particular light it appears bright and prominent, its elevation made visible. By choosing the right light, scientists can read the storm's height directly from how it glows, the tallest features shining brightest. It is a way of seeing altitude as brightness, the storm's 3 dimensions revealed in a single careful image. The infrared glow of the storm reveals the warmth flowing through it, mapping heat where the eye sees only colour. Instruments that read infrared light can map the temperatures across the great red spot, showing its cold, lofty centre and its warmer edges, tracing the flow of heat through its vast structure. This thermal portrait reveals the storm as a landscape of warmth and chill, a map of energy invisible to ordinary sight. To see the storm in infrared is to see not its colour, but its heat. The hidden temperatures that shape its form written across the crimson clouds in light no eye can catch. By combining all these different lights, scientists assemble a portrait of the storm far richer than any single view, a layered understanding built from many kinds of seeing. The visible red shows the chemistry of the summit, the ultraviolet reveals the high haze, the infrared maps the heat, the methane bands measure the height. Each kind of light adds its own thread, and woven together they form an understanding of the great red spot deeper than any one image could hold. The storm is known not through a single gaze, but through many gazes layered upon one another, each catching what the others miss. This way of seeing in many lights has transformed how the storm is understood, turning a flat red oval into a structure of depth and warmth and height. What once seemed a simple marking on the giant's face has become, through these many kinds of seeing, an intricate 3-dimensional architecture of air, tall, deep, warm at the edges and cold at the crown, layered and rooted and finely structured. The storm did not change. The seeing changed, growing richer until the full complexity of the great red eye came slowly into view. There is a gentle lesson in that the world holds more than any single way of looking can reveal. The giant itself glows in many lights beyond the storm, its whole body radiating in colours the eye cannot perceive. Jupiter shines in infrared with its own inner heat, blazes in ultraviolet at its auroral crowns, and even hums faintly in radio waves born of its powerful magnetism. The great red spot turns within a whirl that glows across the whole spectrum of light, a giant luminous in ways no human eye could ever witness directly. To truly see Jupiter is to gather all these lights together, building from them a portrait of a world far stranger and more radiant than it appears to the naked eye. In radio light, the giant roars, its powerful magnetism generating waves that can be heard across the solar system. Jupiter is one of the strongest sources of radio waves in the sky, so loud in certain wavelengths that it ranks among the brightest radio objects in all the heavens, second only to the Sun as heard from Earth. Its great magnetic field and the particles trapped within it generate bursts and hums and crackles that radio astronomers first stumbled upon by accident in the 1950s. These radio storms rise and fall with the giant's rotation and with the motion of its volcanic moon, a vast invisible broadcast streaming out across the dark. The great red spot turns silently to the eye, while the whole giant sings in radio light, a song no ear was made to hear. Yet another spacecraft once paused to photograph the storm on its way to a distant ringed world, gathering some of the finest portraits ever taken from afar. As it swung past Jupiter to borrow the giant's gravity and fling itself onward, this passing traveller turned its cameras back and captured the great red spot in exquisite detail, weaving thousands of frames into a sweeping mosaic of the whole planet. The flyby cost it nothing but a glance, yet the giant's pull bent its path and hurled it on toward the rings beyond, a slingshot of gravity that saved it years of travel. For a brief while, this visitor watched the storm churn, adding its own precise observations before continuing on across the years toward the rings beyond. The storm has been a way station for the wandering eyes of humankind, each pausing to admire it on their longer journeys outward. The crimson of the storm is matched here and there across the giant's face by other reddish features that come and flow with the seasons of the planet's weather. From time to time, broad swathes of Jupiter's belts deepen into rich ruddy tones, and small red ovals bloom and fade in the bands, so that the great storm is not always the only red upon the giant. These passing reddenings ripple across the planet's face over months and years, the whole world subtly shifting its palette. The great storm holds the deepest and most lasting red of all, yet it turns within a giant that is forever, gently, repainting itself in warmer and cooler hues. The storm even helps shape one of the giant's most dramatic slow events, the fading and return of the dark belt that frames it. Now and then, the broad dark band in which the great red spot is set will pale and nearly vanish, fading from deep brown to soft cream over months, only to slowly return again in time. During these fadings, the storm can seem to float more freely against the lightened clouds, its crimson all the more striking against the pale. These belt fadings are among the giant's grandest changes of appearance, and through them all the great red spot keeps turning, a constant red anchor amid the shifting bands. The patterns in that radio song even helped astronomers measure the giant's true rotation, the turning of its deep interior. Because Jupiter has no solid surface, its visible clouds turn at different speeds, and astronomers needed another way to find the true rotation of the planet itself. They found it in the radio signals tied to the magnetic field, which is anchored in the deep metallic interior, and from the steady rhythm of those signals they read the giant's true turning, a single deep day of just under 10 hours. The radio song revealed the heartbeat of the giant, the turning of its hidden core. So the storm turns upon a world that is luminous and singing across every kind of light, far richer than the simple banded sphere the eye beholds. The visible giant is only the surface of something vast and radiant, glowing in heat and ultraviolet and radio, crowned in aurora, wrapped in magnetism, alive with light at frequencies no human sense can reach. And at the heart of all that radiance turns the crimson oval, the single feature beautiful enough to be famous in ordinary light, yet itself only the brightest thread in a tapestry that shines across the whole spectrum. Rest now in the soft glow of all those invisible lights, the heat and the radio and the ultraviolet, none of which you need to see to be soothed by their existence. The giant glows on in colours beyond your eyes, the storm turns within its many lighted sky, and you may simply lie here in the warm dark, asking nothing, seeing nothing, only resting. Let your mind grow dim and quiet as the storm turns far away in its radiant night, and let the soft tide of sleep rise gently around you, drawing you down with every easy breath. Consider the sheer improbability of the storm's existence, how unlikely it is that such a thing should be, and yet here it turns. For a single weather system to last for centuries, to hold its shape against racing winds, to maintain its balance across all the long years, by every ordinary expectation, this should not happen, and yet the great red spot does it, has done it for as long as anyone has watched. It stands as a quiet rebuke to the notion that all things must be fleeting, a vast crimson proof that some wonders endure far beyond what seems possible. The storm exists against the odds, and that alone is cause for soft amazement. The conditions that allow it are a delicate convergence, a meeting of many factors that together make its endurance possible. The lack of any solid surface to drain its energy, the deep atmosphere that gives it roots, the opposing jet streams that spin and cradle it, the planet's inner heat that feeds it, the stable bands that hold their lanes, all of these must come together for a storm like the Great Red Spot to persist. Change any one of them, and the storm might never have lasted. It is a wonder born of many quiet conditions all aligning, a crimson gift of circumstance turning in the giant southern sky. No other planet in the solar system holds a storm quite like it, a feature so large and so enduring. The other worlds have their storms, great dark spots on the distant ice giants, swift winds and swirling clouds, but none has produced a single storm as vast, as colourful, and as long-lasting as the Great Red Spot. It is, in its combination of size and colour and endurance, unique among all the worlds we know, a marvel found nowhere else in our cosmic neighbourhood. To gaze upon it is to gaze upon something singular, a wonder the solar system made only once. The distant ice giants do hold great dark storms of their own, though far more fleeting than the Crimson one. On the most distant of the giant planets, spacecraft have glimpsed great dark spots, vast storms in its blue clouds, swirling against the deep cerulean sky. One such dark storm, seen by a passing probe, had faded entirely by the time a great telescope looked again only years later, and new ones have since bloomed elsewhere in the blue. These storms come and go within a handful of years, appearing and then vanishing, never lasting the centuries the Great Red Spot has endured. They are cousins of a kind, great spots on a giant world, but brief where the red one is ancient, fleeting where it is faithful. The crimson storm's endurance sets it apart even from its distant kin. The giant's neighbour among the gas worlds, the ringed planet, holds its own storms too, though gentler and more hidden. On the great ringed giant, vast storms occasionally erupt, sometimes wrapping a bright band the whole way around the planet before fading, a so-called great white spot that returns only once in a generation or so. And at its north pole turns a curious six-sided pattern of cloud, a hexagon wide enough to swallow several Earths, its straight edges holding their shape year after year as though drawn with a ruler. These are wonders in their own right, yet none rivals the singular fame of the great storm, the lone swirl that has held its crimson watch across the centuries. Among all the storms of all the giant worlds, the red eye of Jupiter remains the most enduring and beloved. Even the giant's own atmosphere, were the storm to fade, would likely birth another great swirl in time. Because the conditions that make the Great Red Spot possible are woven into the very nature of the giant, the deep atmosphere, the racing jets, the inner heat. It is likely that even if this particular storm should one day dissolve, the giant would eventually spin up another great spot in its place. The red eye may be one in a long succession, each rising and lasting and fading across spans far longer than human records, the giant forever painting and erasing its grand storms. The particular storm may be mortal. The giant's capacity for such storms seems not. Computer models that recreate the giant's weather have begun to capture how such a storm can endure, gathering smaller swirls to sustain itself. When scientists build simulations of Jupiter's atmosphere within their machines, they find that a great anticyclone like the Great Red Spot can persist for very long times by absorbing the lesser storms that drift near, each small swirl feeding a little energy into the great one. In these models, the storm survives not by standing apart but by quietly consuming the weather around it, renewing itself through what it draws in. It is a comforting picture of endurance, that the storm lasts by gently gathering, not by resisting, sustained by the very turbulence that might seem to threaten it. The smaller red storm born in recent times, the great storm's little echo, spins with winds nearly as fierce as its elder. When the three white ovals merged and reddened into the second red spot, observers measured its winds and found them whirling at speeds approaching those of the Great Red Spot itself. A smaller storm, but a mighty one. Perhaps half the great storm's width, yet nearly as fierce at its edge. For a time, the two red storms turned in the same southern band, the elder ahead and the younger trailing behind, and watchers held their breath wondering whether they might one day collide and merge. Instead, they passed close and parted, the smaller storm surviving its near approach, two crimson eyes that brushed by one another and turned on, each keeping its own slow rotation. To imagine the giant's far future is to imagine the storm turning on for ages yet uncounted, long after every present watcher is gone. Whatever becomes of this particular oval, the giant will keep spinning for billions of years, its deep heat slowly cooling, its bands wheeling, its capacity for great storms enduring as long as the planet itself. Across that vast future, crimson eyes may open and close upon the giant countless times, each turning for centuries and fading in its season. The storm you have wandered tonight is a single page in a book. The giant will go on writing long after the last human eye has closed, a quiet and endless chronicle of weather kept in the clouds of a faraway world. There is a deep comfort in imagining that the giant will always hold some great storm, that the sky of Jupiter will never long be without its crimson wonder. Whether this very storm endures or fades and is replaced, the giant seems destined to turn some great spot in its clouds, a feature of its very nature as enduring as the planet itself. The red eye, in one form or another, may turn in those clouds for as long as the giant exists, a permanent kind of impermanence, a wonder forever renewed. The particular storm is precious for being itself. The lineage is comforting for being eternal. The whole storm rotates with a curious internal pattern, the inner clouds turning at a different pace than the outer rim. Within the structure, the rotation is not uniform. The very centre turns slowly, almost calmly, while the outer bands of the storm race far faster, so that the whole is a nested set of turning rings, each at its own speed. It is like a vast slow wheel within a fast wheel within a faster wheel still, all spinning together around a quiet hub. This layered turning is part of what gives the storm its stability and its strange enduring grace, each ring holding the others in balance. The shape of the storm has changed over the long years of watching, slowly drawing from a long oval toward a rounder form. In the older records, the Great Red Spot was a long stretched ellipse, sprawling far more in width than in height. As it has shrunk over the past century, it has not merely grown smaller but grown rounder, its long oval pulling inward toward a more circular shape, more intense and compact than the sprawling marking earlier observers knew. The storm is changing its very form across the generations, reshaping itself slowly enough that no single watcher could see the motion, yet surely enough that the records reveal it. As it has grown smaller and rounder, the storm has in some ways grown fiercer, its winds quickening even as its size shrinks. Strangely, as the Great Red Spot has contracted, the winds around its rim have not slowed, but in some measurements have sped up, as though the storm drawing inward spins faster the way a skater pulls in their arms. The shrinking and the quickening together make the storm's future uncertain. Whether it will continue to tighten and intensify, or whether it will eventually unwind, no one can yet say. The best-known storm in the solar system keeps even its own destiny a secret. No one knows how the storm will end, or whether it will end at all within any span a human could witness. The Great Red Spot may continue shrinking until one day it dissolves entirely into the bands, or it may stabilize at some smaller size and turn on for centuries more, or it may even regrow. Its slow contraction over the past 100 years gives no certain answer, only a gentle mystery hanging over its far future. To watch it now is to watch a storm whose ending no one can foresee, a wonder that keeps both its origins and its destiny folded away within its turning clouds. Whatever its fate, the storm has already outlasted nearly everything humanity has built, turning steadily through the rise and fall of the modern world. Across the centuries it has been watched. It has turned through revolutions and empires, through the births and deaths of nations, through every change in the human story since the first astronomers noted it in their journals. It does not know or care for any of this. It simply turns, the same storm seen by watchers in powdered wigs and by watchers with computers, a single unbroken thread of crimson rotation running through the whole modern age. There is a quiet comfort in that constancy, in having something so vast and so faithful turning far beyond the reach of all our changes. Whatever has shifted in the world below, the great red eye has kept its rotation, indifferent and serene, a fixed wonder in a changing sky. It was there before you were born, it turns now while you drift towards sleep, and it will turn on tomorrow night and the next, faithful as a heartbeat, asking nothing of the world it has watched for so long. Let that faithfulness hold you gently, a sense of something enduring keeping its slow watch through the dark. Consider how small the storm appears in the grand sweep of the giant, and yet how large it looms in the human imagination. The Great Red Spot covers only a tiny fraction of Jupiter's vast striped face, a single oval among many bands and swirls, and yet it has captured more human wonder than almost any other feature in the solar system. There is a gentle lesson in that disproportion, that what is small against the cosmos can still loom immense in the heart, that a single beautiful detail can hold more meaning than all the empty miles around it. The storm is tiny upon its giant and boundless in the mind. To hold both truths at once, the storm's preciousness and its impermanence, is a gentle and freeing thing. The Great Red Spot is beautiful precisely because it is this storm, turned for these centuries, watched by these eyes, and it is at peace with its own eventual ending, content to turn while it turns and to fade when it fades. There is no grief in this, only a soft acceptance, the same acceptance that lets a drifting mind release the day. All beautiful things are precious and passing at once, and the storm teaches this gently, turning in its crimson now without fear of its someday gone. Imagine the sound of the storm, though no ear will ever hear it, a roar beyond all earthly thunder. If you could somehow stand within the Great Red Spot, the winds racing past your ears would carry a sound vaster than any storm on earth, a deep and ceaseless roar woven from the friction of clouds and the crash of opposing currents. Yet so high above the thin clouds and so spread across such distances, the sound would be strange, immense, more felt than heard, a planetary murmur far below the reach of any human sense. The storm turns in a silence to the eye, and a thunder to the imagination both at once. The storm's motion creates waves that ripple outward through the atmosphere, spreading from it like ripples from a stone. The churning of the great red spot sends out atmospheric waves, slow undulations that travel through the surrounding clouds, and these waves carry energy far from the storm itself, even upward into the high, thin air where they break and warm the upper atmosphere. It is one of the ways the storm influences the giant far beyond its visible edge, sending out invisible swells that reshape the air around and above it. The Crimson Eye is a great stone forever dropped into the sky, its ripples never ceasing. Those ripples may be the reason the air high above the storm glows so unexpectedly warm. Scientists long puzzled over why the thin upper atmosphere crowning the great crimson oval runs many hundreds of degrees warmer than expected, far too hot to be explained by the distant sun alone. The likeliest answer is that the storm itself heats the air above it, sending sound and gravity waves upward from its turbulent depths, and those waves break high in the thin air and deposit their energy as heat. The storm, in other words, warms its own sky from below, a fire reaching upward through the very motion of its clouds. Imagine the storm against the deepest backdrop of all, the vast emptiness of space in which the giant hangs. Around Jupiter spreads the frigid black of the far solar system, an emptiness so complete that the giant and its storms float utterly alone, the nearest otherworld millions of miles away across the void. The great red spot turns in profound isolation, a single splash of colour in an ocean of black, a warm crimson eye gazing out from a giant hung in nothing. There is a strange peace in that solitude, in picturing the storm turning quietly in the great emptiness, untroubled by the vast dark all around it. The light that reaches the storm from the sun has crossed that emptiness for the better part of an hour to arrive. Sunlight leaving the sun must travel for around 43 minutes to reach Jupiter, crossing many hundreds of millions of dark and empty miles before falling at last upon the great red clouds. The light that paints the storm crimson is old light by the time it arrives, having journeyed long through the dark before touching the giant. The storm is lit by a sun it sees as a distant point, its colour born of light grown old in the crossing of the void. Out at that great distance, the sun itself appears small and pale in the giant sky, a brilliant point rather than a warming disk. From Jupiter, the sun would seem only a fraction of the size it appears from Earth, a fierce, bright star casting a faint and chilly light across the crimson clouds. The Crimson Eye turns through a perpetual cold twilight, lit by a sun too far to feel warm, its famous colour coaxed from clouds by a light that barely heats them. There is something tender in that, a storm dressed in fire-bright crimson by a sun that hangs cold and small in its distant sky. In that dim and distant light, the storm's colours are subtle things, deeper and softer than the vivid images might suggest. The true great red spot seen in natural light at Jupiter's great distance is not the saturated scarlet of enhanced photographs, but a gentler shade, a muted rose or pale salmon or soft brick, its colours deepened in images to reveal detail the eye would barely catch. The real storm is a soft and dusky thing, its crimson quieter than the pictures, a gentle blush upon the giant's pale clouds. Picture that softer, truer colour now, a muted rose turning in the dim, distant light. The whole giant, seen from that great distance, would be a small bright bead against the stars, the storm a tiny speck upon it. From far enough away, Jupiter itself shrinks to a single point of light, indistinguishable to the eye from a star, the great red spot lost entirely in the smallness. It is only by drawing near, by crossing the vast dark, that the giant swells into a banded world, and the storm resolves into its great crimson oval. From afar, all that grandeur collapses into a single faint point, a humbling thought, that so much wonder can hide in so small a speck of light. And yet that small bright bead has been a companion to human eyes for all of recorded history, a faithful wanderer in the night. Long before anyone knew of the storm hidden in its clouds, Jupiter shone as one of the brightest lights in the sky, a steady beacon that every generation has watched cross the heavens. It has been a guide, a god, a marker of time, a presence in the human night since the very beginning of looking up. The storm was secret for most of that history, yet the giant that holds it has always been there, a bright and faithful light keeping its slow path among the stars. Even the giant's place in the sky has guided wonder and reckoning for thousands of years, long before its storm was known. Jupiter has been watched and named by every ancient people who looked up, one of the bright wandering lights that move against the fixed stars, a steady beacon that crosses the heavens on a slow and stately path. It bears the name of the king of the Roman gods, fitting for the largest of all the planets, and its slow journey through the constellations was tracked and recorded by astronomers across the ancient world. The storm hidden in its clouds was unknown to them, yet the giant itself was already a presence in the human sky, ancient and luminous. It takes the giant nearly 12 of your years to circle the sun a single time, a slow and patient orbit through the dark. While the Earth races around the sun in a single year, Jupiter moves so far out and so unhurriedly that it requires almost 12 years to complete one loop, gliding along its orbit at only a fraction of Earth's pace. This means the giant passes through roughly one constellation of the zodiac each year, a stately progression that ancient skywatchers used to mark the turning of long spans of time. A child born when Jupiter stood in one constellation might be most of the way to adulthood before it returned to that same patch of sky. Across a single human childhood, Jupiter barely completes one of its great years, the great red spot turning thousands of times over, while the giant itself moves but once around its sun. Despite that slow orbit, the giant rules the solar system with a gravity that shepherds comets and shields the inner worlds. Jupiter's immense pull reaches far across the dark, drawing in or flinging away comets and asteroids that wander too near, acting as a kind of vast guardian that has, across the ages, deflected many wanderers that might otherwise have struck the inner planets. Some believe this great shepherding has helped keep the inner solar system calmer than it might have been. The storm-bearing giant turning its red eye in the clouds is also a quiet keeper of the peace, its gravity gently ordering the spaces around it. Now and then the giant catches a wanderer entirely, drawing a comet or asteroid down into its clouds. On rare occasions, a comet or small body strays too close and is captured by Jupiter's gravity, pulled inexorably down to plunge into the atmosphere, leaving dark bruises in the clouds that linger for weeks before fading. Once, a comet was seen torn into a string of fragments before it struck, each piece slamming into the giant in turn and raising scars as wide as the Earth. These impacts have been watched in modern times, great dark marks blooming on the giant's face, some of them visible even through backyard telescopes lingering for days and weeks before the winds erase them. The great red spot turns on, untroubled, while elsewhere on the giant the marks of such captures heal, the atmosphere closing over them like water over a thrown stone, leaving no scar where a whole comet once fell. The very stuff of the giant connects it, in a deep way, to the sun and the stars themselves. Because Jupiter is made almost wholly of hydrogen and helium, the same elements that fuel the stars, it is in composition more like a small failed star than like the rocky worlds of the inner system. Had it gathered far more mass in its birth, dozens of times what it holds, it might have ignited into a star of its own, kindling a fire at its heart instead of merely glowing with leftover warmth, and your sky might have known two suns. The great red spot then turns upon a world that very nearly became a sun, a near star that holds, in its quiet way, the same ancient ingredients as the fire it orbits. There is a soft poetry in that kinship, in knowing the storm rides upon a world half made of star stuff, glowing faintly with its own dim fire. The giant is a bridge between worlds and stars, too large to be merely a planet in spirit, too small to have caught light. And upon its face, The most beautiful storm in the heavens keeps its slow rotation, painted by a distant sun, warmed by an inner fire, turning in the company of moons and auroras and racing bands. To rest your gaze upon it is to rest upon something that touches, in its substance, the very nature of stars. To know now that this familiar bright wanderer holds such a storm is to see an old companion with new wonder. The same point of light that ancient watchers tracked across the sky carries, in its clouds, the most enduring storm in the solar system, turning slowly through all the centuries it has shone above us. The giant was always more than a light. It was always a world, always turning its great red eye in the dark even when no one knew. To look up now and find Jupiter is to greet an old friend whose deepest secret has at last been glimpsed. There is a quiet intimacy in that recognition, in connecting the bright point in your sky to the great turning storm you have wandered through tonight. And the very light by which you would see it has been travelling a long while to reach you. When Jupiter lies far across its orbit, the sunlight glancing off the great red spot takes the better part of an hour, around 50 minutes, to cross the gulf to Earth. So the storm you glimpse in an eyepiece is the storm as it looked nearly an hour ago. The faint light you might see above your own roof is the same giant whose crimson eye has filled your imagination through these slow hours. The same world, the same storm, only seen from afar as a single gentle star and a little into the past. The far and the near are one, the great red wonder and the quiet point of light, joined across the dark by nothing but distance. Let that gentle joining rest in you as you breathe, the immense storm and the soft star, one and the same. Let the storm shrink gently in your mind now, back into that single point of light, a soft bright bead among the stars where it began the night. You need not hold its vastness any longer, need not picture every swirl and band. Let it grow small and distant and peaceful, a faint warm light in the far dark, turning quietly on without you. And let yourself grow small and peaceful too, settling into the warm dark of where you lie, while the giant shines faintly in its faraway night, and sleep gathers close around you, soft as the light of a distant star. Drift now toward the last of the wonders, the deepest and the quietest, the one that holds all the others within it. For everything you have wandered through tonight, the centuries of turning, the depths and the heights, the colours and the winds, the moons and the auroras and the singing radio light, all of it belongs to a single storm on a single world. One small crimson eye in the vastness of a cosmos beyond all counting. And that storm has turned through it all without knowing it was watched, without needing to be, beautiful in perfect indifference, asking nothing of the universe but to keep its slow and ancient rotation. This is perhaps the final secret of the great red spot, the one that gathers all the rest into stillness. It is that the storm does not care to be a wonder. It does not turn for human eyes, does not blush crimson to be admired, does not endure to be remarkable. It simply is, a vast and patient overturning of air on a distant giant, following only the laws of wind and heat and gravity, indifferent to wonder, indifferent to watching, indifferent even to its own beauty. And somehow that indifference makes it more beautiful still, for it reveals that the universe is full of marvels that need no witness, that exist purely and completely for themselves. There is a deep and settling peace in that thought, the kind of peace that asks nothing and gives everything. The storm has turned for centuries without you, will turn for centuries more, would turn just the same if no mind ever knew it. Its beauty is not a performance but a fact, woven into the world whether seen or unseen. And so you may rest without the weight of witnessing, without the need to hold or remember or admire, knowing that the wonder turns on regardless, complete in itself, needing nothing from you at all. You're free to simply be, as the storm simply is. Perhaps that is what the great red eye has to offer most of all, across the hundreds of millions of miles that separate you from its turning. Not its size, not its age, not its colour or its winds, but this, a quiet permission to exist without justification, to turn through your own dark hours as the storm turns through its own, asking nothing, proving nothing, simply being gently and completely in the warmth of this one peaceful moment. The storm turns, you breathe, and that is enough, and always was, and always will be. Let that final secret settle softly through you, the deep ease of a wonder that needs no reason to be. And so the journey through the giant's great storm comes gently to its close, all its wonders wandered, all its colours seen. You have drifted through centuries of turning and miles of depth, through racing winds and quiet centres, through moons and auroras and lights the eye cannot see, and now there is nothing left to do but rest and let it all settle, and let yourself sink fully into the peace of the dark. And if you're still here, drifting there at the edge of sleep, another quiet journey is already waiting for you on the screen, ready whenever you might wish it, or never at all. There is nothing you must do, nowhere you must go, only this gentle resting in the warm dark. You do not need to carry any of it with you, not a single fact, not a single number, not a single image. Let it all dissolve, the way the storm's stray wisps dissolve into the brighter clouds, the way the day dissolves into the night. What stayed with you can stay. What slipped away was never a burden to begin with. There is nothing to hold now, nothing to keep, nothing to remember. There is only this stillness, this warmth, this slow and easy breath. Let your body grow heavy. Let the weight of you sink kindly into the bed, into the dark, into the deep quiet of the hour. Let your thoughts grow slow and few, like a storm settling toward its calm centre, like the last light fading from a distant sky. The great red eye turns on far away, faithful and patient, asking nothing of you, and you may turn gently toward your own rest now, slow and unhurried, safe and warm. Let the breath come easy, let the body grow still, let the mind grow quiet and dim. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to know, only rest now, only stillness, only the warm dark holding you close. Let go, let yourself drift, let yourself sink down into sleep. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.